As we get started here, the workshop today is called The 3 Financial Mistakes People in Recovery Make. And Rabbi Iggy and myself will be with you every step of the way today. And what are we doing? We're going to show you common mistakes people in recovery make with their finances and how to shift from struggling with organizing your finances, feeling overwhelmed, financial uncertainty, to improving your relationship with money, understanding your financial situation, and strengthening your recovery. And so, that brings up a question of why is looking at personal finances an important part of recovery and well-being? What do you think, Iggy?
There's a few comments in the chat. First, right? More financial security, one person writes, which is sort of why they're here. I want to be better manager of my money as I head into my 30s. I think that's great. And then to learn how
right place.
That's right. And then to learn how to think about money and change my relationship with finances. Also,
wonderful.
Really think grow more responsible with my finances, be aware and intentional. Absolutely.
This is the place to be for that, most definitely.
Bonnie, right? Understanding and
under-earning and under-being is a disease.
Under-earning and under-being is a disease. Yes, and like most diseases, it has a cure. This is not fatal.
Right. Yep.
Right? Just being here talking about money gives me spilkes. For those people who don't know what spilkes are, spilkes is the Yiddish word for needles.
Okay.
And usually, so like, spilkes in your tuchas, spilkes in your butt, that you can't sit still. You want to do something else. It's a kind of, like a feeling like I can't just sit here. I have to go do something else. So
that sounds uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the things we're going to be mainly talking about here today is the emotional and the spiritual elements of money and why that's important in recovery.
Right.
And so I invite you to stay with us till the end today. We're going to provide an opportunity. There's a special bonus that we just added to the program. And we'll say a little bit more about that closer to the end. So make sure you stick around to find out what that is. And just for the next 75 minutes, turn off all distractions. Give yourself the gift of just being here with us and talking about your financial well-being, looking at what we're offering here today in terms of emotional and spiritual support in addressing your finances and enhancing your recovery. So if you have any other tabs open, if you have any other screens, any other devices, obviously you can do what you like, but we invite you to close out of those and just be with us here for the next few moments. And so you're in the right place if you deal with overdraft fees, late payment fees, interest charges. If you get hit with unexpected charges that throw off all the rest of your expenses. If you have debt that you have no idea how you're going to pay off or when you're going to pay that off. And if you're feeling like money is out of control and overwhelming. So you're in the right place if you're looking for a system to help you organize your financial life. If you want to take charge of your finances and get rid of debt, if you want to feel more confident about your money, and if you want to strengthen your recovery, those are the folks that we're here to serve, and this is what we're here to talk about today. And whatever your reason for being here, we fully support you. Everybody's financial and recovery path looks completely different. People do different things. People have different amounts of money. People have different problems with money. Organizing your money is only part of the work. A big part of finance and money is our spiritual and our emotional relationship to money. And most of the spiritual support out there, or most of the financial support out there, it doesn't address these elements. And I guess a question for you here is like, why do you think the emotional and the spiritual aspects of finance often don't get addressed?
You're asking me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do those parts get missed?
You can ask other people. So I think in many ways that's one of the key questions for this program and in general. I think that right, like you said, if people right, don't open their mail, right, don't look at their banking account, don't check their accounts, don't balance the checkbooks, although that's not sort of so done so much anymore. It usually is because we feel that our worth comes and is attached to money, that our worth is attached to how much we have in the bank, that seeing how much we have or don't have in the bank makes us feel very anxious. The fear of the institution, right? This sort of, right, money, banks are something that is external to us. That can be very overwhelming. And also it reminds us, and this is really the saddest thing for me, it reminds us of how much we don't understand. We don't know what those things are. We don't know how money works, right? Fees, all these things come into play, and all of it really feeds on this idea that we're not worthy, that something is wrong with us, that something is the matter with us, that, right, money is for rich people, right? Banks are for rich people. This is an evil necessity we have to go through. And then there's the layers of like money we owe, money we don't have, things we know. We go, somebody just wrote in the chat, right? If you buy a house or a car and all of a sudden you have to pay for it, right? It's a commitment. So it really brings up all the parts that are so tied to addiction, but not just addiction recovery, just regular living. All these mean that sort of we have to draw from the spiritual background, which we'll talk about, right? It means that we have to draw from the worth of ourselves. And if we don't have that, or if that is depleted, then we really avoid. And that's how we get into trouble, because then we don't interact with it. We get deeper and deeper in the hole, and I think for a lot of people, like somebody said, there's also a lot of trauma around money, growing up poor, not having enough, right?
Yep.
Feeling less than. So money really triggers all the self-worth issues for a lot of people. And I think that's what we think, that if we avoid it, we feel better about it. And for a while we do, until we have to face the fact that we are, adult. Yeah. Somebody just wrote, also living in a gambler. Absolutely. We'll deal with that. And you're in luck. Julio is actually an expert in process addictions. So we'll be
Yeah,
able
that's
to,
actually one of
yeah.
the ways in which I got into doing this particular work is working with people that are recovering from gambling disorder. So that's actually one of my certifications as gambling addictions counselor. And also shout out to Bonnie and to Lori talking about Debtors Anonymous and Under Earners Anonymous, and I think there's also like Overspenders Anonymous, but those are actually financial supports out there that address the emotional elements, right? That is part of that financial recovery that we're talking about. So all of that is
wait,
welcome here.
I do want to say that sort of like, while that's very important, that there are a lot of people, and I think both here and the other things we do, that sort of, that even if you're not in debt, right, even if you don't, right, if you're not like, right, so like under earner, right, it's like that sort of, you can be regular person, right, and still not know enough, and still have these feelings, and still sort of like need the support in that, even if you don't have the qualifiers for the other thing, right? And that's really, really important, because I think that's where a lot of people kind of fall down, because they think, oh, it hasn't gone this bad. And I think what we're trying to say is like, everybody should know how can the money work for them, not just people in sort of like in those situations.
Yeah, those are very particular, but this is much larger than that. And I mean, that kind of goes back to what we're speaking about here. It's just like, whatever brings you here, whatever your motivation, whatever your path, you're welcome. And we hope that this is going to be helpful for you. And now we'll talk about who the heck are we? So who are you, Rabbi Iggy?
Oh, look at that picture. These are the same kind. Yeah, it's almost the same. I'm Rabbi Iggy. I'm the founder and CEO of Tshuva Center, which is a intentional spiritual recovery community that will be residential once we're out of COVID. I come from over, right, so like a long time, over a decade of working in recovery, and so like in the spiritual realm of recovery. I was the director of spiritual counseling in a place called Big Tshuva in LA. I've done a lot of work around spirituality, and around the idea of vernacular spirituality or everyday spirituality, spirituality versus religion. My own background, in many ways, I started my first real big jobs were actually in finances. many years ago. I'm very fortunate that my parents did spend a good amount of time trying to teach us sort of what money means and all that that entails. But what brings me here most importantly is the ability to help people manage their spiritual styles or spiritual attachments or spiritual bank accounts that we want to open, so they can have enough core worth and core strength to also support their financial goals and their financial needs. And those are really tied in. People think that there's a distance between the spiritual and the physical, but really, I think they're much closer together. And that's sort of what brings me to this mission, trying to help people feel that their worth is not tied to money, but also allowing them for them to be able to address all their money issues the best they can.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, I'm so fortunate and so excited to get to co-facilitate this with you and to like kind of bring both of our experiences together to support people in developing their financial well-being. So I'll talk a little bit about myself now. I think most of you might know Rabbi Iggy, but I might be a new face here. So my name is Julio Iniguez, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified drug and alcohol addictions counselor and a certified gambling addictions counselor. I have been working in that field since 2014 and mostly have focused a lot of my work around supporting people in recovery from gambling disorder. That's something that's like in Oregon, particularly since Vegas style slot machines are one of the products for the Oregon lottery. Those create a lot of addiction. And so that's been the bulk of my work. And part of working with people that are dealing with gambling disorder really focuses on the money piece, just because money becomes such a completely different entity with people that have a relationship to money that is addictive. And, you know, with gambling addiction particularly, the money is just sort of the vehicle into the gambling. And the gambling is really about what all addiction is about: pain relief, right? There's something that's unbearable that's happening in my life, and I need to disconnect from that pain. And it can happen in kind of like really big ways like gambling addiction, but it can happen in subtle ways too, like emotional spending, like debting, overspending, like those kinds of things are also ways in which that can show up. Aside from those things, I'm also a person in recovery. And I also, you know, would identify as a person in financial recovery. When I became a gambling addictions counselor and started needing, as part of my work, to support people with their finances, I came to realize that I didn't have my financial situation figured out at all. And I come from a place of, like, I would consider myself a wounded healer. Like, the reason I do the work I do is because of the, you know, the trials and tribulations that I've faced in my life and the difficulties that I've had. I like to use that as a launching off point to understand and empathize with people that are going through struggle, to support them. And so I needed to figure out my money situation, and it took me years. You know, the information is out there, and there's so much information, and to be quite honest with you, in the beginning I didn't even know where to start. And when they train you as a gambling counselor, they make sure you know to talk about finances, but they don't really get into the specifics of like what you should be looking at and how or what processes might be supportive for people that are trying to get their finances organized and get them together. And so that's something that over the years I ended up just learning and picking up and using with my clients, and ended up really enjoying it, and finding that a lot of the clients that I was working with were really benefiting from some of the systems that I shared with them, and were really starting to think about their money in a different way, in a way that created a foundation for their recovery. And so that's what I'm interested in sharing. That's why I'm here. That's why we're doing this. And so, going on to the main event here, what we're talking about is the 3 financial mistakes that people in recovery make. So let's get into that. The first one we're looking at here is spending money to emotionally regulate. So who can relate, right? Like how many of us here have ever spent money to feel better, right? How many of us have ever bought something, whether it's a meal out or a new iPhone or a new computer, just because you wanted to get something, you wanted to nourish yourself in some way or another. It's often called emotional spending. People refer to it as emotional spender. And so what does this actually look like? 6 signs that you might be an emotional spender. So you end up making big purchases and then return them later, or you end up dealing with buyer's remorse, where you buy something that you spent a lot of money on and then you're just kind of like feeling like, I wish I could return this, but I can't, or maybe you do end up returning it, or maybe the buyer's remorse kind of goes away. Either way, that wasn't something that you planned to buy. Usually it's more of an impulsive decision, and you may have had the money for it, you may not have had the money for it, right? It could have been bought on a credit card, or maybe you had cash to buy it. But either way, there's this emotional need that you're getting met when you're buying something. Another example that would be shopping when you feel bad, and shopping to feel better. Like, this is the thing that's actually gonna either solve my problem or make me feel good in the moment. You get a dopamine rush after buying yourself something. So, and I still fall prey to this. I love getting things in the mail from Amazon. I mean, that feels good, right? I do it in a different way now, but that's the thing, is like, I don't do it the way that I used to do it before. But that dopamine rush that we get, I mean, it really lights up our brains when we get to meet that emotional need any way we can. And sometimes spending money can do that for us. Another sign of this would be not tracking your spending or budgeting for unnecessary items. So if you don't have a system by where you're tracking what you need to be spending your money on, and then you're making these large purchases, then that can also have an impact that not only affects your finances, but it actually also affects you emotionally and spiritually. You hide what you buy because you feel shame or guilt. You might, buy something that you really didn't need, and maybe it could have been quite expensive. And so then there's like a weird feeling in, bringing it out or showing it to people because, it makes you feel a certain way. Or you make a big purchase to celebrate or reward an achievement. And usually, rewarding yourself with something that you didn't plan to buy or you didn't expect to buy. For me, this was like one of the defining moments in my financial recovery. There was a point where, I racked up like $6,000 in debt after buying myself things I quote unquote needed, but really it was, I needed them to make myself feel better. And I did that in about a month. It took me about 4 years to pay it off. So that's the other thing about financial recovery, is that it is an uphill climb at times, right? Like, you can spend money really quickly. Money you have and money you don't have can just like come out of your account so quickly, but then getting yourself and clearing that ledger takes more time. And that's where, the spiritual and the emotional regulation skills are really, really important. And so what's happening here, right? Like, when we're doing emotional spending, what's happening? So you're emotionally regulating. You're spending money and buying things to change how you feel, oftentimes to feel better, oftentimes not having other options to either connect with your emotions, to identify what emotions you're experiencing, to know what information your emotions are trying to connect to you. Like, one of the big things that I teach people is basically helping people unlearn the myth that there's good emotions and bad emotions, right? There's
Julio,
no
we
such
also have a
things.
question at some point.
Emotions are just emotions. Let's see.
Battery 90%. Connected
I
to
speaker.
Is it Julio? We also have a question through. Can you hear me?
NR6.
Okay.
Julio?
Were you saying something, Iggy?
Yes, we also have a question, because someone's like, the
Okay.
question is, how do you distinguish between needs and wants?
That is a really, really, really good question. And distinguishing between needs and wants, I think, is a personal thing. Like, people can distinguish what they need and what they want when they clarify what their values are.
Mhm.
So I think one of the first things that people have to do is they have to figure out like what is important to me, right? Is what's important to me security, right? Which, you know, something then that I would need would be financial security, which means that how am I setting myself up financially to be secure in the future? Or maybe my value is adventure, or my value is like connecting with people, or, you know, seeing the world. And then that would mean that then my money would be better spent like traveling the world or doing something different. So needs versus wants, there's a process that people have to go through to really get clear on what that is for themselves. Oftentimes when it's a purchase that is giving you that dopamine rush, or that is like meeting that emotional need, that's often evidence that it's probably more a want than a need. Like, I pay my rent every month and I'm never that excited about paying it. And like, that's for sure for me a need. I need shelter, right? And so there's ways in which you can filter the different things that you want to purchase and figure out what the things you need are and what the things you want are. I don't know
So
if you have anything
right.
to add to that.
Yeah, so two things. One, I definitely agree about the values. I think values is very important. I think values are very important in general. If you go to actually the Truva Center website under resources, there is something called a value clarification exercise that helps you really create those values. And we'll talk about this sort of a little bit in the spiritual background when we get to it in a second. But the other one, which is sort of thing, is for me, the difference between a need and a want is always clarified with a budget. That is, we'll talk about, it's like sort of that when I do the budget, I have to decide what are the things I can and cannot live with, and what are the things I want, right? So when we do a budget, it's a little bit like, you know, like if you ever go to the supermarket, there's a big difference if you go hungry to the supermarket, right? And without a budget or without a list, right? You'll buy all sorts of things that you A, don't want, B, don't need, and should not consume, as opposed to going to the supermarket healthy, not healthy, sorry, like, I mean, not hungry, satiated, right? So like, right, which is one of the tips that I think that sort of people don't really know about saving money, is never go to the supermarket hungry, and always make a list ahead of time, because then you get to the supermarket or the grocery store, wherever you buy your groceries, at least pre-pandemic or whatever, but like then you know what you really need and how you're going to plan your meals and stuff, rather than just like have this sort of like, you know, emotional hunger thing, or like, oh, this will taste good and this will taste good, and then you always spend more money than you can and buy things that you don't. So that for me is very similar. So the list, a budget, and ability to do so is very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, those are really good ways to look at it too. The other thing I just remembered is also like the difference between emotion-driven behavior and behavior-driven emotion, right? So usually wants would fall under the emotion-driven behavior.
Yes.
So it's like I'm feeling, you know, bored, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. And so that emotion drives my behavior. And it can drive my behavior around finances. And so that might look like I'm going to go eat out, right? Or I might go to the grocery store and just stock up on ice cream and all these things. I'm really, what I'm trying to do is make myself feel better, right? Or I might actually go and shop online or go to a store or something. And so that's the behavior driven or emotion driven behavior. The other way around is the behavior driven emotion goes back to what you're talking about, Iggy, which is this idea of a budget, where it's like money is a finite resource. No matter how much you have to prioritize where it goes, right? And so if you drive that behavior of prioritizing your money, when you feel bored or when you feel like you're craving, you're going to have to tell yourself no to spending money, because that money is already set aside for something else. But then when you do that and you make it through that moment, right, and then you feel better, then there's going to be a behavior driven emotion where you're going to feel satisfied with yourself. You're going to be feeling like you're aligned with your values. You're going to feel like you're moving towards your goals. And so that gives you more of that long-term satisfaction rather than the short-term dopamine hit. I think that's another thing that can distinguish those. So Coming back to our slide here, the other thing that can be happening here is inflating your sense of self-worth, buying things that give you a sense or a sense of status or a sense of ownership, whether it's the newest iPhone or a designer purse. Sometimes we just want to buy something so that the object can make us feel a certain way, right? The other thing is you might be self-soothing, spending money
because
eating
it
out,
does work for a bit, right? That's the thing. For a minute, it does work, right? You get it,
sure it does.
right? And that, because right, it's important to remember that when you do that, you get the thing. You walk out, you're like, oh my god, great purse, oh great dress, you look great, right? Like it does give us this illusion of self-worth because it does work for a while.
Yeah, there is a momentary need that is being met, right?
Right.
But then when you overdraft your bank account or when you rack up more debt, right, then that's also going to create a feeling state.
That's right.
And that's what we're looking at. Then it creates a cycle, right? That looks very similar to what an addiction cycle can look like. And that's kind of what we're interested in kind of breaking out of those cycles, because honestly, being able to treat yourself and buying yourself something that you want or something that you like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's no better feeling than having the treat yourself category in your budget, saving up money and then spending it on whatever you want, right? It's like you get to do the same thing. You get to feel the dopamine rush of getting the thing you want, but you also feel at ease and at peace with your financial well-being because it's aligned with your values and it's not stealing up from yourself in the future.
Dina, right, which is true. So does spending hours on Amazon to find the perfect version of it, a fleeting hit. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, yes.
The anticipatory part of like, right, excuse me, of the buying of the thing, of the looking, right? So like this illusionary, I was like, oh, I'm choosing between this Prada bag and this Chanel bag, right? So like that sort of there's this illusionary state that sort of
going in there and like looking at all the reviews, making sure, once you see a negative review, you're like, oh, I gotta look for another one. Like I've done that, another thing you might be doing is self-soothing. So like we were just talking about like spending money eating out or things that kind of just make us feel better, right? Whenever we're feeling hurt or whenever there's like an ouch moment in our lives, sometimes like ice cream or like soul food or, going out to the movies like that might actually feel really nice. And the next thing is reaching for your ideal self. And this kind of connects back to inflating your sense of self-worth. It's kind of trying to change who we are through what we buy. That sense of I'll be this person when I buy this thing. And here's some alternatives we can offer here today. So the first one is emotional agility, and emotional agility really covers a lot of ground. So there's like the idea of emotional flexibility, the idea of emotional intelligence, the idea of emotional awareness, which all kind of point to how do I build a relationship with my internal emotional world and meet my emotional needs. And I think I kind of like halfway was talking about there's no such thing as a good emotion and a bad emotion, right? Like all emotions have important information for us. And so unlearning some of the things that we learned about how we deal with emotions can also be very helpful in unhooking from some of these behaviors with money. So the second mistake here is I'll be happy when. Do you want to talk a bit about this, Iggy?
Sure, and it's funny because Lori just wrote that in the chat because
that's funny.
Because I'm sure because I've been speaking about this a long time, right? I often say the most toxic sentence in the English language is I'll be happy when, right? And we've all done it. I'll be happy when I get married, when I have a boyfriend, when I have a girlfriend. I'll be happy when I get a promotion. I'll be happy when this test is over. I'll be happy when I get this car. I'll be happy when I pay this debt, right? Like, right, even like in things, right? I'll be happy, right? I'll be happy when I finish rehab. Like we've all made these statements. And this is a statement that is toxic because from a spiritual bank account perspective, right? It is basically just kicking the bucket down the road and never being happy. Happiness, joy, gratitude is a choice of right now. It is not something that we get into. It is not a room. It is not an asset. It is not a place that we are at. It is not something that we own. Happiness is a state of mind, and it's a choice that we make. Now, there are tools to get more happy, more joy in our life. Gratitude being one of them. There's a few other spiritual tools for it. But the important thing to remember is that when we say that, what we're saying is two things, and both of them are very harmful to our soul and to our finances as well. One is we equate our happiness with some external force or something that is time bound, or some asset that we have to get to, or some place that we have to get to, right? So the boyfriend, the car, the promotion, the baby, whatever it is. And when we do that, we basically are saying like, oh, happiness, contentment, joy, right, is not in me. It's somewhere else. And it's as soon as it's somewhere else, it's not in me. And I've lost the battle. And the other part, it means, right, that, sort of that you're validating yourself through this process, and that you are not allowing yourself to choose to be happy with what you have. One of the basic tenets of Judaism is there's a question in the Mishnah. This is a 2,500-year-old question that says, who is a rich man? It actually asks that. And the Mishnah says, he who is happy with what he has. That is, looking at what we have, right, rather than what we just want or things that we may or may not get, right, is the key to being content with what we have. And in that sense, that allows us to be able to look at ourselves, look at our spiritual bank account, our regular bank account in a much more profound way, right?
Totally. There's a really great question here. It says, how do you avoid being on a hedonic treadmill and then always returning to the prior state, good or bad? And that really connects to what you were talking about, Iggy, in terms of like, how do you go about making the switch from, you know, being in the mindset of I'll be happy when, which to me is like part of the hedonic treadmill, right? We're conditioned to like want things and want things and want things, and we get that instant dopamine rush, but then it kind of goes away. How do I learn to appreciate what I have?
Right. And how I got what I have. And that's really important, right? The hedonic treadmill is like, again, part of this idea, this workshop, and I think the course that we're developing, right, is to switch the perspective of things that will get to me rather than things that I can make happen myself, right? The ability to take control, sovereignty, right? The ability to open a spiritual bank account and saying, okay, I'm going to invest in a spiritual bank account, right, is one of those key elements of that, because, right, you can change the situation that you have by bringing more awareness into it, more mindfulness into it, more ability to take control of where you are. And that way you stop it, because then you say to yourself, okay, it's not good or bad, it is what it is. And now it can change things, right? That I'm starting to take the value out and say like, okay, how I do A, it affects me B, right? Yeah. Right? I take A action, that's how things. That's where like, oh, I can actually affect the change by my action, not waiting for something to happen to me, not waiting for something that will get, will get there or whatever. And that's really, really important. The other comment, there's another side, winning the money game and finding out you were playing the wrong game. I mean, that is, I think that right, that relates to what you just said. Like, a lot of people think that the source of their misery and the solution to their problem is more money, because they think that money will give them more access, more power, more clout, more tools, and
which is true.
Which it can, but it can never change how you feel, right? One of the main elements in my own family, right, is, and I know some people won't particularly love that, but like we say any problem that can be solved with money is not a real problem. Because the things that matter to us the most, really, spiritually, emotionally, right? Health, love, connection, worth, those are not attached to money. Money can make misery a lot more comfortable. Don't get me wrong. right? When I'm not negating money in any way, shape, or form, right? I don't have the privilege to, because, right? Because I come from a very privileged place. But don't confuse money with worth.
Mm.
And don't confuse money with intelligence. We think that people who are rich are more intelligent, and they're not. Not always, at least.
Mm. The other thing that it made me think about was, in terms of gratitude, using gratitude as a practice rather than as a state of being, right? So, the power of creating a gratitude list, and what you're actually doing is looking around, sort of taking inventory of your life to look for and to find the things that you do have right now that you can appreciate.
Right.
Because I know for me, we know that we're hardwired with this negativity bias, and
Right.
that's just part of our survival mechanism. We're always going to look, and readily available, we can see the deficits or all of the negative things that are around us. But one of my favorite gratitude practices is even just like having clean water to drink, right? And contacting that feeling of just like, okay, I actually don't have to go on a long journey to some clean river for me to get clean water. And we can do that with a lot more than just water, with our finances, the things that we have.
Right.
And that's sort of an act of rebellion too, because we are so conditioned into the scarcity mindset of you won't be happy until, like, that is really how things are marketed to us, right? Those are the ways in which they try to get into our heads so that we can spend more money looking for that emotional satisfaction.
Right. And I would say, that is like, right, even how we talk about this, I try to avoid saying I have gratitude and always say I practice gratitude. I don't have gratitude. It's not an asset, right? I practice gratitude, right? That is really more, because it's more dynamic, and again, puts the onus on me to do this, right? Or as you write right in this slide, right? The biggest mistake is confusing something we can buy with something we can choose to be content with now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yes, let's just make sure that. Yes, Stephen, yeah, the Beatles song. Yes. I don't care too much about money. Money can buy me love. Absolutely. 100%.
That is a good one. Okay, so the third mistake is spending money based on how much money is in your bank account. So
tell us more. I mean, that was one of the interesting things. So that when we started talking was very interesting to me, because I think that is one of those sort of like light switches.
Mm-hmm. A light switch in what way?
And it's where it's like, what is that? Like, oh yeah, that's true, right? Because we think, right, that we should spend money based on what we have in our bank account, right? That seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's this thought of like, but I had enough money for this, right? Your bank account balance, you use it as a point of reference for your spending without putting your money into context. You end up spending your money to the last cent, right? You might spend all of it. This type of thinking can keep you in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And there's almost this like underlying belief there of like, spend it if you got it, right? Which ultimately kind of ensures that like you never actually get ahead, because you're never thinking about the future. It's always like what I have now, what I can spend now. When an impulse or a craving arises, we don't access the best quality rational thinking. And so we only look to see if there's enough in the bank account to cover the expense. The fact that you're looking at your bank account means that you already have a sense that there's like a limited amount of money available. Once again, money is not an infinite resource. So you might be staying out of debt because you had enough money to buy that thing, but you might also find that you also have to spend money on something that you didn't remember at the time, and something that is more of a need than a want, which also gives us more of a reason to get into debt, right? To use a credit card. It's like, I bought this thing I wanted because I had cash for it, but now I don't have the cash for the thing I actually need. And now, well, I need it. It's okay to use a credit card. And that's part of what can also become a vicious cycle. And that's something that used to happen to me all the time, whether it was like either overdrafting or finding out that I forgot about a particular bill that month, and then having spent that money and then having to cover it with a credit card. It's impossible to keep all of the jobs that your money needs to do for you in mind at all times. There's often too many things to track, including monthly subscription services, monthly expenses like your electric, your Wi-Fi, your rent, car insurance. There's just so many things that you use your money every month for, that you need to use your money for. Using your account balance to make spending decisions is often a sketchy practice because you're most likely forgetting 5 things that you need to spend money on.
But you fixed that, right? You created a tool for that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't create it. It's called a budget, and I think it's been around for ages, right?
No, about the sheet that you were.
Oh yeah, well there is part of the financial acceleration tool that helps you not only realize. So basically it's, instead of looking at your account balance and kind of hoping it all works out, you make a list of all of your known repeated monthly expenses and make sure that you have enough money set aside to cover those. And then beyond that, you can decide what you spend your money on, right? But here you have to reference something else other than your bank account balance, because your bank account balance is often not the most reliable thing to use.
No, it lies to you, right?
Yeah, it can. Yeah. So
right?
The suggestion here is get clear on what your goals are, get clear on what your values are, so that your spending adds value and meaning to your life, rather than satisfying cravings or regulating your emotions. Because without that point of reference, without an external point of reference that isn't your bank account, you'll end up in a compromising situation.
Right. Because I think, right, talking about what we talked before, right? You look at the bank account a little bit like a new person. You're like, oh, look, right? I'm rich, right?
Right.
And then you start thinking like, oh, I have money to spend, but you're not realizing, of course, that this is just a moment snapshot, right? Of something different. Although I will say an anecdotal thing that I think when I had one of my first jobs teaching, I was making I got to make $35,000 a year, and I remember thinking, like, what am I going to do with all this money?
Right. Yeah.
I was like, oh my, like I have like hundreds of dollars.
It felt like so much, right? Yeah.
It felt like so much, right? So like all of a sudden, like I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Joke's on me, but
totally, yeah. But then all the bills catch up, and then you
end up with, like, actually, no, I can't do much with that.
Right, you end up with more months at the end of your paycheck, kind of thing, right? And spending money that way too, it's a sign that like you haven't clarified your money goals and that you don't have a spending plan. Like it's totally okay if you're there, but there's probably emotional and psychological turmoil that's related to your finances that is created and maintained by this habit.
Right. And then Lindy just wrote something very, very important, right? Which is, and then you get surprised by unplanned expense. Right.
Okay.
And that's right. Because I think I read a thing a while ago, but it was like, this was pre-pandemic, but it was how most Americans are one health crisis away from bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about expensive. Yeah. Health crises are, I'm still paying one of those off.
Yeah.
And Lori's joke is great. How can I be overdrawn? I still have checks in my checkbook.
I think Lori's showing her age. Who has checks?
Or there's still like credit available on my credit card. Either way.
Right.
So yeah. So the next one, it's like you are reading our minds. The next one is getting hit with big expenses you didn't expect. Right. Let's see. So think of it like your friend's wedding is coming up, your car breaks down, your pet needs to go to the vet. There's always big expenses that show up throughout the year. And oftentimes these hit you unexpectedly, and they can really throw off your money situation altogether. Like most recently for me, this was car repairs. So I was working at a place where I had to commute 50 miles there and 50 miles back. And this is like, 5 days a week. And I would have to, in January, spend like $1,500 getting my car repaired just because of the wear and tear. And it would just, kind of devastate my finances. It ended up being credit cards that I used to pay that off. But I was like, gosh, like what can I do about this? And then I realized that every year in January that happened. Every single year in January, like that was happening. And so it kind of gave me the idea of like, well, if I know that I'm going to keep driving, then that probably means that at some point my car is going to need maintenance, right? And if my car's maintenance is costing me $1,500 a year, then if I divide that by 12, now I've got a monthly savings goal so that when next year comes around, I have cash on hand to be able to pay this off. And there's other things other than that, like think about like Christmas gifts, vacation spending, weddings, graduations, baby showers, vet visits, rent insurance. There's so many like annual dues that happen infrequently that are usually more expensive, that feel really unexpected, but really we could have planned for them, right? Like, so why do we get caught off guard? Like if you zoom out enough in your financial picture, you'll see that your pets visit the vet at least 1 to 2 times a year, or that under normal driving circumstances, your car needs service 2 to 3 times a year, including oil changes. It's not that you're getting caught off guard; it's that you didn't prepare, right? It's sometimes it's hard to see this because if you think about, well, I know what my monthly expenses are, but these things usually don't happen monthly. So then we get that false sense of security where it's just like, well, I got all my, monthly stuff covered, but then, the car breaks down and all of a sudden I have to cough up like $1,500. Well, I don't actually have it. Like, what am I going to do? Right. So it's not always to see these recurring events, especially if you don't know how to look for them. And it's a totally normal part of getting your financial life in order. But once you figure this part out, it's a total game changer, right? And so how do we actually do that? You take a look at your spending for the last 3 to 6 months, and you look for large expenses, whatever this means to you, right? Large is a relative term here. You see if it's an expense that might be coming up in the next few months or maybe sometime next year. And then if you can expect to never pay that type of expense again, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you can be certain that you're going to find yourself having to pay that again, and you just don't know when, right? Then you know that at some point you're going to need that amount of money. So you take the amount of the expense and you divide it by the number of months that you expect to pass before it's due. And a lot of the times this is a guessing game. But even if you do a guessing game and you save 3 months worth of money, you're still that much more ahead than you were before, right? And that way you don't have to get caught off guard by this one again. You do the process over and over again, as looking for as many of these irregular large expenses as you can, and prepare yourself to be on guard the next time it shows up. Right. And there's something actually really great and really satisfying when you're because when we take our cat to the vet, especially for annuals, it's like $600. And I remember the first time I was like, oh boy, like that, that kind of set me back a little bit. But now I contribute to that every month. And now that he's, coming up for another annual here, like I can just go ahead and pay for it. And it's no sweat off my back. Like I don't have to feel stressed. I don't have to feel avoidant for wanting to take him to the vet. Like it's just something that I've already planned for.
And that's for the things that you can plan, right? That's for the things that you can sort of like actually plan, right? So like Lindy wrote, right? So like we just had to use our trip to Israel money for a car accident. The woman who hit us was uninsured. Sometimes we can do, we can,
yeah.
But also like I know of somebody I know who had a job, everything was great, blah blah, was paying bills, living in New York, standing there waiting to see another friend of mine, and some car just ran into him, and then he was in the hospital and he couldn't work, right? He's a freelance today, and he couldn't work, and all of a sudden, and right, like sort of right, people had to do like GoFundMe's and stuff because like right, there's no thinking. So right, so if you're lucky, you can look at like, oh, my car that needs to be broken, needs to be having issues once a year, or the cat, but sometimes we can't plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so and in a lot of these, you know, they're infrequent and they're large and they're annual. So there are the things that are completely unexpected and that we really cannot prepare for, like, you know, life does happen. But there's most of them you can. You know, there's a lot that you actually can plan for and that you can be ready for.
There's a question, I don't know
So
if you want to
now we'll
address
go.
at some, oh, sorry. There's just a question, I don't know if at some point you wanted to address, maybe in the Q&A. And what
Okay.
if you're already deep in debt due to these surprises and can't take advantage of these great ideas?
That's right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, debt sucks. I mean, that sucks, and it happens to the best of us, and it's there. And part of the emotional work around debt is like accepting it. And then the next part of it is figuring out having some type of debt repayment plan, right? Because I mean, there's some debts that we can knock out pretty quickly, and then there's some debts that are going to be sticking around for a while, whether it's a mortgage, you know, for me that's going to be student loans. But in terms of the things that I can manage, like credit card debt, or sometimes even like medical debt, those you can come up with a plan and create like what is the balance that feels right to me, so that I'm not ignoring and avoiding my debt, but also that I'm not able to not enjoy my life, right? Because I mean, there's the debt-free community. There's a lot of people that, you know, buy into this idea that debt is, you know, absolutely bad, and they spend years of their lives focused on nothing but paying down debt. And it, you know, it does take them 5 to 10 years, but then once they do, like, they can do, you know, whatever they want. And so that's a personal choice for all of us here today as well, is just like depending on how much debt you have and how badly you want to get rid of it, right? Because paying down debt does take sacrifice, and it does take cutting down on other expenses, and it does take like getting really clear around priorities and around values. But yeah, that does happen.
Right, if I'm right, in the 8-week program, the financial well-being that we're going to run at the end of the month, we do have some suggestions, right? Some ideas on how to look at debt and how to, right? So like look at what consolidated debts look like and stuff, and some right, some matrices for people to consider, right?
Yeah, different ways of creating a debt repayment plan.
Yeah.
So that you have, you know, at least a sense of like how long is this going to take to pay off, and also of like organizing yourself in the best way to either, you know, pay them down as quickly as possible or save the most amount of money based on, you know, the interest that debts tend to accrue.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
but that is something we
right. So there is hope, Susan, sort of, you know, there are ways to do it.
There really are. Yeah. And really, I mean, a big part of it, like I said, is just like debts weigh on us emotionally. Debts weigh on us spiritually, right? And part of, you know, the slide that's on screen right now, why you're feeling avoidant, blocked, and confused, and the reason that this program is geared towards people who are in recovery is because there's differences in the way that we relate to ourselves and the way that we relate to the world. There's already like a habit of avoidance coping, right? Addiction is a form of avoidance coping. It's like there's something that feels so overwhelming that I'm going to do this thing to get this like immediate relief, and then that can get transferred to our finances. So part of the work is moving away from the avoidance coping and leaning into, you know, the reality of what's going on, right? Connections with others is also an important part of recovery, and that's why we're actually here in a live workshop talking about this, because the conversation between us is really important, because this is how we co-regulate, right? And we were talking about like using money to emotionally regulate. Money can be really emotionally dysregulating, but when we can come together and talk about it and talk about the emotional and the spiritual impact, then we feel supported the way that we feel supported when we go to a recovery meeting, the way we feel supported when we spend time with our community, right? What we're offering here is just an opportunity to co-regulate with others and to face some of the things that are hard to face around our relationship with money. I don't know if there's other things you might want to add about why people might feel blocked or avoidant or confused, Iggy.
No, but yeah, I think, right, we've mentioned a lot of them, but I think, right, so like one of the ways to look at all these things is, right, do you open your mail? Right? Do you look at bank statements? Do you even get bank statements? Right? Do you even know how many bank accounts you have? I know so many people who's like, oh, I think I have like, a few bank accounts, right? So, there's a lot of inventory that one must do, right? Personal inventory. And kind of like Julio says, like, let's look at the patterns, right? Let's look at sort of like larger things, like, right? Where are your bank statements? Where's the mail coming from? The bills that you get, right, from T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever, where does it go, right? If you have a pile somewhere, you're avoidant, right? If you don't, right, if you look at your paycheck, if you get one and you're not sure every element of where that dollar is, then you're probably confused, right? If you don't want to talk about it, or right, if money makes you anxious or whatever, then yes, and then you're blocked, right? I think that there's so many ways to do this, and the best way to start is to just take inventory and say, like, okay, this is who I am. Then you have a choice of what I want to do with it.
That's right. Yeah. And so what's the promise here today? We want to help you get organized with your money. We want to support you in the emotional and the spiritual process of improving your relationship to money. It's an important part of recovery and also a form of self-care. Knowing what your money is doing and knowing you have a plan for it gives you a peace of mind, and it reduces stress. You can focus on the things that matter. Right. So what we're talking about here is, gaining clarity,
right,
experiencing peace of mind, developing a sense of security, feeling in control, and having a plan. So how do we do this? So gain clarity through connecting your values to your finances. And that's a really important piece of recovery work as well, right? Because a lot of addictive behavior is not in alignment with our values. And sometimes it happens for so long that we don't even have clarity around what our values are.
Right.
Like, I don't even know what values are. I don't know what they are.
Well, you should take the value clarification tool that we've developed.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a really important piece to do, because once you have clarity on your values, then you can connect that to your finances and create financial goals, right?
And not just financial goals, you create a better financial future, right? If you know your values, and then now you have an issue to look at, right? If you know your values and you weigh them against your values, now you have ability to make a plan. I think what a lot of people just don't know what to choose, so they get sort of like stuck in that. But if you have values and be like, oh, if I have, let's say these are my 5 values, and I have, choice A or choice B. And if I weigh them against my values and I see, okay, choice A gives me 4 values, choice B gives me 5 values, that's your plan, right? That way, it could do that. And that's really one of the most important things. And this is true for so many aspects of life that are tied to these finances, vision goals. Jan asked everyone, can Julio talk about scarcity as a feeling, even when it's not reality?
Yeah, so scarcity as a feeling, right? Especially around the financial piece. I think this kind of goes back to like a very zoomed out sort of philosophical way of looking at how, as humans, we have agreed to use money as this currency that gives us access and power. And the way in which our world is organized right now creates a really real sense of scarcity because of systemic issues. And because of the way that wealth inequality is showing up for people right now. And so that sense of scarcity, sometimes it is actually real for people, but also there's ways in which we can fall into the trap of the way that we get conditioned by consumerism, where it's feeding us that idea and that sense of it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough, which is also a form of scarcity. And so the other side of scarcity is abundance, right? And like Iggy was saying with the spiritual bank account, having a lot of money doesn't necessarily create abundance. Abundance is not a financial idea. We have to decouple abundance with finance. Abundance comes when we're healthy, when we're connected, when we feel well, when we feel aligned. So that sense of scarcity, when it's not a reality, even just the fact that there's a sense that there's not a reality, speaks to the underlying emotional, spiritual issue at hand. Right, because sometimes scarcity really is real. Some people are really struggling out there with not having enough money, and there's systems that are set up so that that is true for certain people, and we have to acknowledge that. But then there's also times where we feel that sense of scarcity, that sense of lack, that sense of craving, when we know that's not really true. So the work then is not so much of the financial work, but it's more of like the psycho-spiritual, emotional work.
And I would say even more, right? I've worked with the full gamut, right? From sex workers to murderers to right all the way to bankers and celebrities, right? And I have a few clients, right, who are some of the richest people around, some of the richest people in California, some of celebrities who are household names around the world. The people with the most money in many ways are the people with the least amount of spiritual abundance. They you know, there's a lot of scarcity there, and it is really about a feeling, not about money or power or fortune. And as soon as you can change that, you can actually generate a lot more for yourself rather than just the money.
Yep, absolutely. And so finishing up here with these bullet points that we have, right? So not dealing with overdraft charges. And here we're really talking about overdraft charges that you can help, because you can't ever, expect the unexpected. Develop a sense of security through saving a couple months of expenses, if that's a goal that's important to you. Feel in control by intentionally spending your money, and have a plan, right? Know how you'll pay off your debts. The solution we're presenting today is the Financial Wellbeing Program. This is an 8-week recovery enhancement program for harnessing your finances with empowerment, confidence, and serenity. There's 3 elements to what we're going to be talking about. There's the financial strategy piece, which is learn the basic budgeting methods to bring intention to the way you spend and save money. There's the emotional regulation piece, where we'll talk about learning how to manage and relieve the anxiety, overwhelm, fear, and discomfort that arises for you around your finances. And the spiritual principles piece, which is tapping into new perspectives, ease, surrender, and support, guided by your relationship with yourself, your community, and your concept of a greater force around you. What we'll be doing, we're going to be doing live group sessions. We're going to be meeting on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 8 Eastern, and we'll be starting on April 27th and going through June 15th. What are we going to look at? So there's 8 modules to this. The first module, we're going to be getting clarity around what's important and why doing this work matters to you. So this is where we're going to talk about what are your values. We're going to do that work together. We're going to identify stages of change and get some sense of, because change, it's not always the right time to make a big change. And so we're going to look at the stages of change and where you can identify yourself, so that if it's not the time for you, you know what you need to do in order to get to the time where change is accessible and possible for you. The second module will be looking at figuring out who you are and who you want to become through this process. We're going to be looking at, your bank accounts, both the spiritual bank accounts, and we're going to be looking at your financial bank accounts and your income, and looking at what's happening there, just like the baseline there. The third module, we're going to be exploring your conditioning around money and its impact on your idea of money, identifying external influences, whether it's what you learned in your family of origin, what your parents taught you about money, or what you learned from the media and from advertisements. In the fourth module, we're going to look under the hood of your monthly spending to look at your needs, your wants, and your habits. And as you put this under the microscope, that awareness of what's going on will empower you to make choices going forward, to look at goals. And we'll talk about, you know, what goals are going to be realistic and what goals are going to be more aspirational, but we're going to support you in moving in the direction of your goals. One of the things that I think has been true in my personal work and my work with clients is that financial well-being and financial recovery happens over time. It's not, you know, a one-time deal, and breaking out some of these habits can take some time, but it's all about that consistent, steady progress over time. The fifth module, which we're calling Lighten the Load and Taste Liberation, is all about facing your debts and making a plan to pay them off. I think this was what Iggy was referencing earlier. We do have a financial acceleration tool where you'll list out all of your debts, you know, what the balance is, what your minimum payments are, what your interest charge is, and then look at what would be the best way for you to pay those down and what that would look like real time in your monthly budget. So that's what we'll be doing. Module 5. Module 6 is all about intentional spending, which is figuring out on paper what you want your money to do for you. Now that we have all this information, you have more choices about, like, well, where do I actually want my money to go? What do I want my money to do? Module 7 is about resilience and strong recovery, and kind of learning how to stay on track with moving towards your financial goals, but also how to bounce back when you don't. What we're really going to be looking at here is how to work with shame and how to do shame resilience, because oftentimes when we make financial mistakes, it can actually make us feel pretty crappy about ourselves. And so what we're going to be learning here is how to work with that, and actually how to use shame to motivate us to stay on track and to keep moving forward. And finally, in Module 8, it's going to be about setting your money goals for the future and to celebrate the momentum and to keep going and to understand that, like, once you complete these 8 modules, it's essentially just the beginning. Like, you have a clear picture of what's going on with your finances, how you're feeling about them, where the conditioning has come from, where you want to go, and how to get there. What this program is not, is I'm not a CPA. I'm not a certified financial advisor. We are not going to tell you what to do with your money. We are not going to give you advice on where to put your money, how to invest. Anything of that sort is not what we're doing. What we are doing is we're teaching the skills so that you can organize your money and make decisions based on what matters to you. So what will you receive in the program? There's going to be 8 live virtual group training sessions. There's going to be an online course members area where we will be including all of the session replays. So if for some reason you can't make it to a class, not to worry, they will be recorded. You will be able to access it after the fact. There's going to be bonus trainings in there. We'll probably do some recordings of, like, how to use the financial acceleration tool so that you can reference it in between classes. And then there's going to be some enhancement resources in there as well. We also have some bonuses. The first one is the financial well-being workbook. We also have the financial acceleration tool, which I was just talking about, and we also have the well-being community. So what are these? The first one is the well-being workbook. This is going to help you gain clarity on your financial strategy and your behaviors. There's reflection exercises so that you can build greater momentum. And we'll be pairing this workshop or this workbook with the live sessions for accelerated growth. The live sessions will be slightly different from this workshop in that we'll be actually much more interactive, and we'll be doing this stuff real time. Right, understanding that there's avoidance around this and understanding that co-regulation can be really helpful. We will all be doing this work together at the same time during these 8 sessions. The second bonus is the financial acceleration tool. So this will allow you to track your income and expenses, so you'll have a clear picture of what's going on there. You'll be able to outline your debt and your repayment plan. You'll be able to prepare for those infrequent expenses that we were talking about. So essentially doing that work of finding those large expenses that have happened in your bank account in the last 3 to 6 months, and then setting money aside for them as they come in the future. And then finally developing a spending plan that's aligned with your values and your priorities. The other one, let's see, I jumped too far. The last one is the well-being community. That is going to be not only the community that we build when we go through these 8 weeks together, but also there's going to be an online portal that you'll be able to access, where there's going to be a community space with a message board where people can, talk about their process. They'll be able to ask questions of myself and Iggy to get some support in between our meetings. We know that accountability increases consistency. We want to increase courage with interpersonal support and celebration, and give a sense of belonging and strength. So what does this cost? The investment for the financial well-being program is one payment option is $595, and you'll save 50% if you take this option. We also have payment plans for those who would like to take care of it that way. So 3 payments of $225 a month, or 6 payments of $115 monthly. If you join financial well-being at the one pay or at one of the payment options, you'll also receive a 30-minute one-on-one financial well-being clarity power session with myself, which you can redeem at any time during the 8-week training. In order to get this bonus, you do have to register and enroll in the program before midnight tomorrow, before midnight on the 14th. But in that 30-minute session, we'll be able to, dig into whether it's your budget, or we can talk about, what's coming up for you emotionally around facing your finances, or any other questions that fall outside of financial advising, whether it's clarifying skills, or whether it's just getting emotional support around doing this work in a one-on-one setting. That will be available. We also are committed to making financial well-being widely available. We want to make sure that regardless of one's financial means, this is accessible, and this is something that we can make available to people. And that's why we've allotted a portion of Shuva Center's resources towards a scholarship fund. So in order to register, in order to sign up, secure your spot through going through the link on your screen. I think the enrollment is open now, so you are welcome to head that way and sign up for the financial well-being program. The enrollment closes either when we hit our capacity. We're limiting it to 40 students because we do want to make sure that we have a smaller group of people moving through this process together, and that we are able to build relationships with each other as we go through this process. So enrollment closes either when we hit 40 students or on Friday, April 23rd at midnight. So whichever one of those two comes first will be when we'll be closing the carts. Also, if you have any questions about the program, you can sign up for a clarity call with myself or with Jess Lippman from the Shuva Center. There's a scheduling link for those free sessions available in the financial well-being sign-up page. In the FAQ section, you scroll down there and you can schedule a clarity call where we can talk about what we're going to be doing in the program, as well as, is this the right thing for you to do right now? We can support you in gaining clarity around that. The members area will be available starting on April 27th, which is the first day of class. So that first Tuesday, or I guess it's the last Tuesday of April, but that first Tuesday that we meet, that online portal will go live. And if you click on the scholarship application button in the information page, you can complete the form so that Shuva Center can follow up with you within 24 hours around available options for scholarship. So please, feel free to check that out. The scholarships are available first come, first serve. And so make sure to apply for these spots if you'd like to benefit from the scholarship.
Also, but just put all that information in the chat for everybody. But like for the next 24 hours, there is a bonus if you want to sign up for within the next 24 hours. So the bonus is $100 off for for the single pay. So if you want to do that, that will be available to you. There is a coupon code workshop. So if you want to do the one-time payment for the next 24 hours, we're giving $100 off. And again, I want to re-emphasize the fact that sort of if you can make that investment, that there are scholarships available, and we want to make sure that sort of that people can actually really be helping themselves to get support around this. So if you do need a scholarship, feel free to go on this website and tell us what you need, and if we can do it, we'll help 100%. There's a question. There's also the 2 links for the clarity calls, for the discovery calls. If you want to know more and talk to Jess or to Julio about like if this is right for you. The question is, there going to be another one of these type of people? Yes, there's another intro on the 20th. We're doing another free workshop just like this one for people with the 3 financial mistakes on the 20th. So if you have friends or other people who want to see this, feel free to absolutely point them that way, and we'll do another free one of those. But yeah, this is also some really great ways to sort of to get support at whatever level you can afford.
So thanks again, everybody, for being here today. I know we went over for like about 5 minutes. We appreciate your patience. We do have a few minutes for those of you that want to stick around and ask any questions. We'll be here for another 5 or so minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending tonight, and we really appreciate your attention and hope to go through this process with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. This has been really great. Thank you. And thank you, Julio. Thank you for doing this with me. I'm really honored and proud. And this is where you're going to be great for everyone who signs up.
Absolutely.